Hello everybody, welcome back to Guitar Solo Dojo. Jason Moore here again. I'm going to attempt to break down the solo for Feel Your Love tonight. I did it once before, but we had some audio issues, and so I'm ditching all that fancy stuff and just going for the basics here. Just pure guitar, and that's it. So, off of Van Halen 1, one of my favorite solos. Of course, they're all one of my favorite solos when it comes to the Eddie Van Halen stuff. Anyway, so let's get right into it. Just like pretty much every other Eddie tune out there, especially the solos, when it gets down to it, it's so much of it is about where the phrasing starts and things like that. And if you get that wrong, you're pretty much doomed, if you want to make it sound like the record anyway. And just big picture thinking, when it comes to that, making it sound like the record and things like that, it's not required. And I think Eddie, when you hear him talk in the past, he's more of a just kind of go for it kind of attitude, and I think that's a great thing. But when it comes to improving your skills and increasing your vocabulary on the instrument, mimicry is an excellent way to do that. And that's one of the reasons I get so deep into this Eddie Van Halen stuff, is that trying to mimic his sounds, even though they may not be technically, like you hear some of these players that play a million miles an hour and they're just super efficient forms and things like that. In a way, they're easier, only because you can look at them on paper and they're a lot easier to break down because the rhythms are so very well structured and things like that. When it comes to the Eddie stuff, I can't presume to get into his head and what he was thinking, but a lot of it was just kind of just go for it. But his timing was so spot on and so perfect that he just had this cat-like way of landing on his feet every single time, and I don't think that was accidental or pure luck. I think it was just because he was that good. Anyway, so if you want to increase your vocabulary and just increase your overall skills, mimicry is a fantastic way to do it. Doesn't have to be Eddie Van Halen. It could be anything that you want to do. You don't have to start with that. But that's what I'm choosing to do today, and a lot of times because, like I said, it's very, very difficult to break his stuff down, especially when you look at the music. It gets very, very confusing, and you also realize that if you look at 10 transcriptions for this thing, you'll probably see 10 different versions, which means at the very best, only one of them is correct, and most likely not even that one's correct. And I'm not dissing on all the transcriptions. It's just really hard to tell sometimes what exactly he was doing. So if you're analyzing any of these videos and you're thinking, well, I saw a video where he didn't play it there, it's probably true. I'm just going off of what I've seen and what I've heard and my interpretation of this stuff. So, and hopefully it helps you along your way. Anyway, so back onto the solo. The big key on this solo, just starting it, is making sure you start this intro phrase, these little pickup notes. So it's 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we have this landing on beat number 4, the pickup notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and up. Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3. And from there, the next little phrase, you'll probably be able to work through. Okay, not such a bad lick. It's just this E-based lick, E-blues-based lick. And now I'm here at the 12th fret. One other quick note, I do get a lot of comments about using a guitar with fret dots on it, fret markers on it. I just using this one today, and I assure you, I will use more guitars with fret markers on it. This is just like the perfect Eddie guitar for me because it's already down a half step and everything like that. So I do apologize. Anyway, basically 12th fret E minor blues, and I'll make some notes on the major position shift. So we got 1, 2, 3. Next phrase also starts on 4, but this time of that last measure that we just wrapped up. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, and this next phrase is where things get kind of tricky rhythmically because it's 136, which isn't blazing fast, but it feels faster than it is just because of his phrasing, and he's doing these little things off these big 1.5 step bends. He's tuned down a half step, so it does make it a little easier to get those bends, but you still have to be in control of what's going on there. So what we have here is we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a da 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 da. This weird little rhythm where we had these 2/16 notes placed in different parts of the beat. So let me retake that rhythm. So from this, we got this. So the timing, I'll just hum it out. So 2, 3, da 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 da, and that's kind of where that measure ends right there. So now on to the actual notes of that phrase. I'm up here at the 17th fret, okay, and it kind of shifts to this what feels like an A blues or A pentatonic, but we've got this 1.5 step bend. So it should sound, if you're trying to mark it, it should sound like the 18th fret on the high E string. And then there's a couple ways you can do this. You can actually dip down to drop down a half step, or you could do this. Personally, I just like to do the bends. I think it sounds cooler. And then he ends it with a whole 2-step bend onto this 17, hammer onto 20, pull off to 17. And then the next phrase. First of all, a typical Eddie Van Halen symmetrical kind of scale, and this one's based off of the 12th fret, and it's not a pentatonic scale, but it's a very common thing where he'll, and I've talked about this before, where he'll be playing, say, an E pentatonic or an A pentatonic, whatever it is, and drop down to this flat 5 and base a phrase off of that. And this is kind of the symmetrical scale that he's playing here. If I played it on all 6 strings, it would just look like 11, 12, 14. And on that Van Halen 1 album, he had lots of little licks on I'm the One, a couple other tunes, where he would have this particular pattern. And it sounds really cool, and it's almost always in conjunction with a minor pentatonic or a blues scale that's just right in that same exact area. So in this one, once again, the timing is super important, and it starts on the E of beat number 4. So what we have is we have 2, 3, 4, E and A, okay? And if you start that on the E of 4, you're probably going to be okay, because it doesn't get complicated rhythmically after that point. So it's 2, 3, 4. Ends with that big O slide up to the 19th fret. Okay, so from there, we move on to the next phrase, being this little lick here. This is one of the weirdest phrases in the whole solo because it feels sort of out of time. It's not out of time, but he fits a very odd amount of notes over an even amount of beats, which is always a tricky thing to do. And when you do that, it's probably best just to know where you're beginning, where you're ending, and just try to space it out nice and evenly over that. And I know that's like a, oh yeah, of course, kind of thing, but that's really just the best way to do it. So if you have 2 beats to fit 7 notes, like I think is the case in this little, in part of this run here, you just do your best to space those 7 notes out over those 2 beats, okay? It's not really rocket science, but you do have to do it over and over again. And once again, the phrasing is key here because it starts on beat number 3. We just come out of this slide, which is on beat number 2 of this measure, and then we start this next phrase. That's right on beat number 3. So it's 1, 2, and those are just pickup notes to the next phrase. Something like that anyway. So he has this little phrase, and this just is dropping down to basically a C sharp minor blues scale. Okay? So if you're wondering, I'm at the 9th fret there. And then we jump into this tremolo picking section, something Eddie was very, very well known for, of course. And it also, the pickup notes start on beat number 4. So it's... And then we get this... So I think of this as basically 2 quarter note triplets. So da, 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 da. Okay, and it doesn't turn out perfectly because he does jump the gun a little bit on it, so. Anyway, the idea is if you just practice that line without doing the tremolo picking, da, 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 and you just practice that over and over and over again, then you move the left hand at the same pace, and you just pick up your picking speed. When it comes to that tremolo picking part, eventually you're going to play a very specific amount of notes. You might decide that you're going to just say go for 16th notes, whatever it is, relative to our tempo. But if you're doing 4 notes per quarter note triplet, then it ends up being faster than 16th notes. Anyway, it just depends on how fast you want to pick. But there's no real rules in terms of how many notes that you're actually squeezing in there in that tremolo picking. It's just basically as fast as you can, unless that's just too fast for the human ear to actually pick up on, which might not be the case. Anyway, so you just get that tremolo picking. It doesn't matter if it's fast or slow. So like I said, you could just do the quarter note triplets or double up on it. You know, then eventually just build up the tremolo picking. This leads me into one of my favorite little Eddie-isms coming out of that lick. This is a really cool lick, a way of playing the same exact notes in a very different way. So we're going to start this lick like this. This flat 5 of the blues code. And then we're going to go. And a lot of times you'll see this note here doubled up. So this is the 16th fret on the G, which is the same exact note, a B, as on the 12th fret of the B string. Of course, I'm down a half step, so it's actually a B flat, but we're talking relative to the guitar and to the tuning that we're in. So anyway, so we've got this 16th fret here. And a lot of times you'll see him do this. Bend the flat 5 into the actual normal 5. But in this case, we go actually hit the actual notes. We got... Okay, so we get this cool little melodic phrase right over this, over the C to the D, which is just a C sus4 to a D sus4. Okay, so So the way I play that, I think this is probably what he did, but and I'll probably have people chime in and say, no, he did it this way. That's fine. This is how I do it. So you hit this chord, hammer on to the 9th fret with the right hand, slide up roughly to the 14th fret, and then when I release that right hand, I'll get that left hand to slide up to the 14th fret in its place. End off the solo. Anyway, hope that helps you. And there's a lot to unpack on that, but it is all basically around that E minor blues scale, and then it drops down to the C sharp minor, which is just sort of the relative minor to the minor. Anyway, so we've got an E minor and a C sharp minor. So anyway, so have fun, enjoy. We'll see you next time.